Everyone wants to know, how do I push my baby out as fast as possible without tearing so that the pushing part doesn't have to be miserable? But what if I told you that most mamas are making 4 big mistakes, which is making pushing for them way harder than it needs to be? In this video, I'm going to talk about those 4 mistakes that I see a lot of mamas making during the pushing stage and how you can actually avoid them during your labor. Hey mama, welcome back to my channel. My name is Chanel. I am a doula and I help families who feel very overwhelmed, anxious, even unprepared about the entire birthing process because of so much information out there on the internet. Go to a place where they walk into birth feeling confident, empowered, educated, and really excited to have a very positive, beautiful, peaceful, natural birth experience together. So if that sounds like something that you're interested in, make sure to hit the subscribe button below. Check out all the resources and coaching that I do provide for families down in the description below where I can support you along the journey. Okay, so there are a ton of videos on YouTube right now about pushing, how to push, the best positions to push in, all the things that you need to know about pushing. But one of the things that I am finding, especially as I support more and more families in the pushing stage, is that there are 4 common things that I keep seeing that are happening to mamas over and over and over again. And when I hear the stories of people who I'm not working with, who are coming to me because they had a traumatic birth experience the first time, they didn't feel supported the first time, or whatever the case may be, I may even come across a video on social media. But the commonality that comes up is I was pushing for a really, really long time. I tore and I just felt like I was not in control of the pushing stage and it felt really painful. And the thing is, that should not be the case because pushing should actually be the easiest part of labor. But so many of us fear it because we don't know how to actually push properly. And when we think we're pushing properly because we're watching all these videos on knees in, ankles out, which are things that I also teach, we're doing that without understanding the other parts that get us to the part where we can do a knees in, ankles out position. So we're gonna talk through those 4 mistakes that so many mamas are making, and I hope that you will be able to avoid when you go to push your baby out. Now, the first mistake that I see mamas make is relying too heavily on dilation. I don't know how many times I have to explain this, but dilation matters very, very little in the whole aspect of labor. And when it comes to pushing, one of the biggest mistakes I see women do is start to push because they're 10 centimeters. It is absolutely amazing that you have made it to 10 centimeters. That is what we want for you, and I love that for you. But the problem is we are relying too heavily on dilation rather than what our bodies are telling us. Yes, our bodies have told us that we are 10 centimeters, but there is a thing called the fetal ejection reflex. And that is what is triggered when our babies are ready to be delivered. If you're 10 centimeters, but your body is not involuntarily pushing, which is what the fetal ejection reflex does to our bodies, then it's not time to push. If you have an epidural, you probably will not feel the fetal ejection reflex as much. You may feel more pressure, like you need to go to the bathroom, have a bowel movement, but it's less likely for you to experience this fetal ejection reflex, the urge to push, because you are medicated. This is for unmedicated births. So if you are laboring naturally or your plan is to labor naturally, you want to try to wait until you feel that fetal ejection reflex to push because your body will do most of the work for you. But what we tend to do is we allow our providers to check us. They'll say you're 10 centimeters, let's get on the bed, let's start pushing. And then moms are pushing for hours. One, because they're relying too heavily on dilation and their body hasn't told them, nor has their baby told them, it's time to start pushing. And there is a reason for that, what we're going to talk about next. But keep in mind that dilation is not super reliable in the case of labor. It can be a helpful piece of information, but it does not tell us exactly what we need to be doing, how we need to be doing it, and when we need to be doing it. So keep in mind that yes, you can definitely get your cervix checked. You can definitely say I'm 10 centimeters and we are right there. But if your body is not pushing on its own, then you probably need to wait a little bit and labor down longer until you get that urge to push. Now, the second mistake that I see people make is along the same lines of dilation, but it's the station of your baby. And we are pushing way too early because we've been told we're 10 centimeters and now it's time to start pushing. But what we see a lot in these cases and why moms are pushing for hours is because your baby is actually still way too high into the pelvis. So this is our pelvis. and this is our baby. And a lot of times we can be 10 centimeters, but our baby is floating right up here. Now, the problem with this is that yes, you're 10 centimeters and that's amazing, but your uterus and your body has to push your baby down into the pelvis low enough to the point where their head is going to be crowning at the point when you're pushing. If you're 10 centimeters, your baby could still be floating above the pelvis in a negative station. I have an entire series on station versus dilation, so I would encourage you to check that out so you can understand this a little bit better. The mistake I see a lot of moms making is that they're 10 centimeters, their doctor tells them, let's get on the bed, let's start pushing. Instead of just pushing with the fetal ejection reflex, that tends to happen when your baby is very low in a positive station in the pelvis. Obviously, they're so close and they're ready to actually be born that your body triggers this urge and this reflex to push. But that doesn't happen at 10 centimeters if your baby's floating up here. Now, what you're doing, because you don't understand the station of your baby and you haven't asked that information, you don't actually know how to engage or move your baby through the pelvis properly because you haven't been taught how to do that and you're not being coached on how to do that. You've been told you're 10 centimeters and now you have to use all of your energy and your strength to push your baby down into the pelvis, help them rotate through the pelvis, and then get to the point where you're at this positive station. And now you finally feel the fetal ejection reflex, but this is most likely going to be hours later when you have zero energy left. And you have been changing all of the things that you've learned either through courses, YouTube, social media, wherever you're getting your information from. Hopefully it's not from too many places because that will make you confused on what tips and tools that you should actually be using. But now you get to this point and you're exhausted if you haven't even gotten an epidural by this point. So it is important to understand the station of your baby so you can avoid pushing for way too long just because you're 10 centimeters. Now, the third mistake I see a lot of moms make is the position that they're actually pushing in. Most of us tend to be in hospital settings and we are pushing on our backs with our knees wide open. But if you do not understand the anatomy of the pelvis, you will make a big mistake and do exactly that, which is going to make it harder for you to push your baby out, not to mention the two things that we just talked about. And what most people don't understand about the pelvis is that there are two very important components of pushing. This is the position of your tailbone and this is the position of your femurs and what part of the pelvis you're actually opening up at the right time. And what happens is when we are on our backs and we are pushing with our knees wide open, your pelvis does something like this. Your knees are open, and what ends up happening at the bottom is that you're closing or making the outlet of the pelvis a lot more narrow. So what happens here is that not only are you making the outlet of the pelvis more narrow, you also have your tailbone when you're laying on your back, it's actually curving under and creating less space for your baby, which makes it a lot harder for them to actually be delivered, and it can increase your risk of tearing. So one of the biggest mistakes I see women make is that you're not actually utilizing your pelvis and the position of your pelvis as optimally as you can because you're on your back, obstructing the exit for your baby, and you're not actually allowing yourself the room or your baby the room to be born a lot quicker, which makes pushing harder, makes it a little bit more painful. A lot of women will complain about back issues after pushing. It is a thing and it doesn't work for everybody. And sometimes women will decide and realize that pushing on their back does feel the best. But there are ways around that. There are ways that if you are pushing on your back, you can reposition yourself, you can reposition your legs, the bed, all the things to still create more room in the outlet of the pelvis. But most women don't know that. And so they're doing what they see on TV. They're doing what their providers are telling them to do because it's the most convenient for the provider. And that is a big mistake when it comes to pushing, which can make this whole process a lot harder. So understanding pushing positions, which I have an entire video on pushing smarter, not harder, that you can check out. But understanding pushing positions, understanding the anatomy of the pelvis, which we also go through in great detail in Work Your Birth, which you can obviously get information about that in the description below. But you gotta know your body. You gotta know your body, mama, because the reality is nobody else is gonna teach you about it. So find somebody who's a professional in this space to do it, or understand to learn your body so you can listen to it to feel what position feels the strongest, in labor so you can push your baby out in the easiest way possible. And the fourth mistake that I see mamas make is purple pushing, or how they're pushing in labor. If you have seen any sort of movie, or you maybe even talked to a friend or a family member, you most likely will hear that they are being told to hold their breath and count to 10, and that is how you push your baby out. You like you're pooping. I will spare you all of my opinions about that philosophy when it comes to pushing. However, it is not very effective when it comes to pushing, especially if you have not understood the first three things that we talked about in this video. Because what you'll end up doing is you're exhausting yourself by holding your breath and counting to 10 and hoping that your baby is going to be coming down into the pelvis, while also reducing the amount of oxygen that you're giving yourself and your baby because you're holding your breath. So there's just a lot of things wrong about purple pushing, or holding your breath and counting to 10, and not understanding the proper ways to breathe towards your pelvic floor and actually during the pushing stage to not only push easier but also prevent tearing, because purple pushing puts a lot of pressure on your perineum, which can actually increase your risk of tearing. And again, with all of these tips that I'm sharing, sometimes you may utilize all the things that you've learned and this is the last resort and it ends up working for you. But I would encourage you to not start here and try to utilize physiological tips that will actually support your body in labor. Understanding breathing techniques, which I have an entire video on this as well, when it comes to labor, will help you slow down pushing when your baby is crying to prevent tearing. It will also help you be in tune with your pelvic floor so that you're pushing in the right areas, and it will also allow you to do the least amount of work when you're pushing, because you can actually breathe your baby out. If you are waiting for the fetal ejection reflex, your baby is low enough and you know how to utilize your breath to push power down towards your baby. These are the things that you learn when you're preparing for a natural birth. These are the things that you will learn from somebody who will be preparing you to know all of your rights and options. These are the things that I teach all of my clients, and this is the exact way that I was able to push my babies, both my last two babies, out in under 10 minutes. So these are tips not only that I'm sharing with you, but that I've utilized myself and that I've supported my clients through, and they're very effective and proven. So I hope that you will practice these things. You can practice them when you're having a bowel movement. I share all that in my breathing tips video, and I talk a lot about that in more detail in my program. And this is something that you deserve to know, but unfortunately we're not getting a lot of those tips or pieces of information from our prenatal appointments because our doctors and sometimes nurses are just not trained in those methods, and that's fine, but it is important that you are. So if that sounds like something that you're interested in, definitely schedule a free call with me down below and we'll talk about your birth plans and see how I can support you through this journey. All right, y'all, that is it for me. I hope this video was helpful. It's very short, straight to the point, but I want you to avoid the mistakes that so many moms are experiencing so that you can have a very positive, beautiful, peaceful birth experience, because you deserve that, and it's possible if you have the right tips and tools to do so. All right, y'all, I will see you on the next video.